It's 80 in Mitchell, more 70s Friday.
Hey, good morning. We're live. Sorry, no countdown. I wanted to get going. I didn't want to be late. So, welcome aboard. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much. Okay, here we go.
News Talk 1320, 107.9. The Doctor of Discernment is on the air.
I love the Greg Belfrage show.
I've been listening to you for years, Greg. Thanks for all you do and keeping us informed.
You sound a little taller on radio.
Dispensing a daily dose of common sense, no prescription required.
Americans love a winner and will not tolerate a loser. Americans play to win all the time. I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
This is the Greg.
Good morning, my friend. The marketplace of ideas is open. Welcome to the Greg Belfrage Show this Wednesday, March 12th. All right, we had the U.S. House passing legislation yesterday to avert a partial government shutdown. Now the question is, how will it do in the Senate? In the Senate, they'll need support from at least 8 Democrats to get the bill to President Trump. Now, this is getting it through the House was a big deal. And I think this is the president moving forward on his agenda. Will he be able to get it through the Senate? You've got some who are already saying, no, they're not going to vote for it. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, I think someone certainly who I have a great amount of respect for, Senator Rand Paul. He says, I'll vote for the tax cuts and to make them permanent, but I don't support raising the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. So another Republican senator, speaking anonymously, said there's a lot of angst generally about using reconciliation for debt ceiling for a variety of reasons. I think that's going to be hard to do. So the question becomes, is this thing going to pass the Senate? We'll talk about this coming up this morning. Do you think they should? Should the U.S. Senate pass this debt ceiling plan? So we'll talk about that coming up. Some Republicans, like Senator Josh Hawley in Missouri, want to get rid of the debt ceiling altogether, so that we don't go through this every few years. And there are some then who are okay with that. Senator Susan Collins of Maine disagrees. She says, I don't want to do away with the debt ceiling. But she has routinely voted to advance debt ceiling increases. But she doesn't want to do away with it. So there are lots of differences of opinion over on the U.S. Senate side. Also, the issue of American electricity and the tariffs against Canada and what's going on there has been a big story certainly this week. And now you have the Premier of Ontario agreeing to suspend the 25% surcharge on electricity. And they export electricity to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. And so U.S. Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, had met with Doug Ford, and they issued a joint statement yesterday saying they had a very productive conversation about the relationship between the U.S. and Canada. And therefore, he said, you have Doug Ford backing off his previous comments. He said, in response, Ontario agreed to suspend its 25% surcharge on exports of electricity to Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. So that came after the president had threatened then further tariffs on Canadian steel. He was talking about 50% tariffs, in response to this. And so that is bringing the temperature down a little bit. The president still plans to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum products. that went into effect at midnight this morning. So that is now underway. You're hearing details on that from Fox News this morning. But the Premier of Ontario backing up a little bit on this yesterday. So again, President's 25% tariff increases on steel and aluminum takes effect today. And we'll see what happens. There's a lot of talk about tariffs and what's happening with these tariffs and how we're going to be able to move forward. The president has been involved in some pretty tough talk against Canada, and there are some who are, and not I should say there are some Republicans. There's some who are frustrated with the president and the way that he has been, Canada is hardly America's greatest enemy. And the president is out there with a lot of tough talk against Canada. It's not being well received by some, conservatives. Also, the president announcing yesterday that attacks on Tesla dealerships are going to be classified as domestic terrorism. And the president yesterday purchased a cherry red Tesla for himself, got into the driver's seat, said it's beautiful. It was brought to the White House for him. The president will not drive this because the president, does not drive. The president is driven everywhere that he goes. So the president said of the car, it was beautiful. He said, "This is really amazing." So he's asked by a reporter if the recent violence against dealerships would be labeled domestic terrorism. To which Trump said, "I'll do it. I'm going to stop them. We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company," he said. He said he is stuck up for the NFL and many other American companies. He touted the jobs that are provided to Americans by Tesla. And he said, when you hurt an American company, especially a company like this that supplies so many American jobs that others are unable to do, when you do that, those people are going to go through a big problem when we catch them. We've got a lot of cameras up, he said. So talking about surveillance video, he said, we already know who some of them are. We're going to catch them. And they're bad guys. They're the same guys that screw around with our schools and universities, the same garbage. Now we're going to catch them. Let me tell you, you do it to Tesla, you do it to any company, you're going to go through hell, the president said. And so now there are some who are responding, oh, the president's violating the Hatch Act. He's out there with his new Tesla and he's violating the Hatch Act, and Hatch Act doesn't apply to the president. So it's just a lot of noise on social media. You got to tune a lot of this out because, unfortunately, the Hatch Act applies to federal employees. Does not apply to the president. So, but that's, you get people reacting and you get their guts all in a knot. Just take a breath, take a step back. I think this is one of the difficulties of getting on social media when you're incensed about something and you really don't know what you're talking about. Also, we have Education Secretary Linda McMahon talking about the Federal Department of Education cutting just about half of its staff. And she said her agency took the first steps yesterday to eliminate bureaucratic bloat at the federal level and to bring more power to the states. That's what all this is about. This is not about, depriving kids, or it's about returning power to the states, especially when it comes to education. That power, I think, I just tend to be a believer that government is best when it's closest to the people. And when it comes to educating your kids, who do you think should be more in control? Do you want your state and local governments to be your local school boards? Do you want them to be more in control, or do you want those decisions being made by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C.? It's a no-brainer, I think, for many of us. So the Department of Education announcing cutting nearly half their workforce, and this is something the president has made very clear. And McMahon says, speaking of the president, she said, his directive to me clearly is to shut down the Department of Education, which we know will have to work with Congress, to get that accomplished. So she was on Laura Ingram's program on Fox News Channel last night. And the president has been talking about this. He talked about it when he was out on the campaign trail. He said, we're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. Keep in mind now, we never had a federal Department of Education until Jimmy Carter and the Democrats came along. That's when the Department of Education began, was in the Carter administration. So the idea that, Americans went through a very long period of time without the federal government's involvement in education, and Donald Trump trying to get us back to that spot. He said of the federal Department of Education, we're going to close it up. All those buildings all over the place, people that in many cases hate our children, we're going to send it all back to the states, he had said. Now, that's when he was out on the campaign trail. He made those comments. So there was an incredible exchange yesterday at the White House press briefing. I happened to be in the Kello AM studio yesterday. This is after I was off the air, and I was doing some other work up in our studio. And actually, I was posting my podcast up to Kello.com. So if you miss any portion of the show, you can always listen at your convenience. You can go to Kello.com and my podcasts are there. So I was doing that yesterday, and Carolyn Levitt was speaking from the White House, and it happened to be live. And so I clicked the audio. I was listening to the audio as I was doing some work. And it was absolutely sensational. Carolyn Levitt was asked by a reporter from the Associated Press. He said, when President Trump last addressed the BRT, when he was on the campaign trail, his big push was on tax cuts. He's going there today as he's proposing tax hikes in the form of tariffs. And Levitt says he's not doing that. And then he continued, he said, I'm curious why he's prioritizing that over the tax cuts. And I've got to tell you, Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, the way she responded, she just did not take any guff. She is. I would not want to challenge her, especially on national television, as this reporter with the AP was doing. And he's saying, so what he's trying to assert, the Associated Press, what he's trying to assert is that he's framing tariffs as tax hikes, and the American people are going to pay for this, is what he's suggesting. And she said he's actually not implementing tax hikes. Tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries that, again, have been ripping us off. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people. And the president is a staunch advocate of tax cuts. As you know, he campaigned on no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security benefits. He's committed to all three of those things, expects Congress to pass them later this year. So then this guy says, I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have. They don't get charged on foreign companies. They get charged on the importers. And Levitt, she does not even flinch. I mean, she just, she says, she repeated some of her points, and she said, and ultimately, when we have fair and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, our country will be made healthy again. And then she said, also, I think it's insulting that you were trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I now regret giving a question to the Associated Press. Oh, it was delightful. It was, I happened to be watching that live as it happened yesterday, and I've got to tell you, I laughed out loud. It was just, and then later in the day, yesterday evening, Katie was doing some work from home, and she was working on the computer, and she was watching some video, and she stumbled across a video of this, and she's like, have you seen this? I'm like, oh, yes. Oh, yes, I wouldn't. That was pretty incredible. Also, a big story this morning, you have Ukraine agreeing to accept a 30-day ceasefire. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the U.S. would present the ceasefire offer to the Kremlin. And he said, we're going to tell them this is what's on the table. Ukraine is ready to stop shooting and start talking. Now, remember that Vladimir Zelensky had said he was absolutely unwilling to even talk ceasefire. Now he is, Ukraine willing to talk about ceasefire. You and I have talked about this previously. Ceasefire is not the end goal. Peace is the end goal, but a ceasefire is a significant step toward peace. So that also happened yesterday. You have the Secretary of Agriculture telling Fox yesterday that the average price of a dozen eggs, I know a lot of you are concerned about egg prices, understandably so. She said the average price of a dozen eggs is decreased by nearly $2. So egg pricing has dropped $1.85 per carton. And she said, we believe that the market has reacted to our plan that we rolled out on February 26th, she said. So they're expecting that, we may see then with Easter approaching, a greater demand for eggs. So, but egg prices, I know many are keeping their eyes on egg prices. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court has declined to hear the appeal of Ronald Hiddle. He's a fire chief from Stockton, California, who brought a religious discrimination case following his termination. And he had attended a church-sponsored summit for Christian leaders, which sounds wonderful, actually. So he went to the summit, though. Problem was it was during work hours. And so the city of Stockton, this is Stockton, California, fired him. And not just for this, they actually said it was not any discriminatory reason, but they accused him of years of mismanagement, misconduct, refusal to follow orders of his superiors. And so he is trying to get his case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has made the decision not to take his case. And then, that raises a lot of questions. Should you, be attending a church-sponsored summit for Christian leaders? That's all well and good, I think. During work hours, are you taking time off for that? If I was going to do something like that, I would actually put in for vacation. And I would say, hey, this is something I want to do. I'll put in for vacation, take the time off. So the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to hear his case. Also, we're learning that Rosie O'Donnell has confirmed that she's moved to Ireland because Donald Trump won his re-election bid. So she announced in a TikTok video yesterday that she moved to Ireland on January 15th with her 12-year-old daughter, Dakota. And she went on to explain that she is in the process of getting her Irish citizenship. Her family is from Ireland. Her grandparents are from there. And she said, I was never someone who thought I would move to another country, and that's what I decided would be best for myself and my 12-year-old child, she said, and here we are. So she decided to move overseas. And that's a look at the big stories this morning. Thanks for starting your day with the Greg Belfrage Show at 627. Clear skies and 28. This hour of our show brought to you by the Window Shop of Mitchell, offering custom windows starting at $99 a month.
Gallagher, weekend 6 to 9 p.m. Kello News Talk 1320 107.9.
The Kello Hotline is sponsored by Tires, that give you more tire and automobile. There's also, do you see that Dylan Mulvaney was on The View, and, they asking questions about, what happened with the whole, her endorsement of Bud Light and what happened with that. And there's a very interesting piece. I may have to talk about this in the fourth hour today. She's tearing on Trump, and I don't care. I don't care what she is saying. Really just not interested. But Bobby Barack has got a great piece at Outkick this morning saying, the backlash against Bud Light was never about Dylan Mulvaney. It's about Bud Light and what they were choosing to do, what they had chosen to do, which was essentially, light the company on fire. Pretty crazy.
When they do,
I think we'll talk about that on the fourth hour this morning.
Americans trust My Patriot Supply, the leader in long-term emergency food storage to protect their families. For a limited time, order their best-selling 4-week emergency food supply and get 4 free 72-hour food kits. That's 12 extra days of food at no extra cost.
Also coming up later this morning, we'll do this. We'll talk to Jim Olander of the Sioux Falls Stampede today at 8. And then at 8:30, Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, says he stopped reading news, and he says, I sleep so much better. Something to be said for this. You might find that odd that somebody who's, talking about news, sharing a lot of news. But I will tell you very candidly, there's a point in the day where, and I've talked about it on the air this morning or before. There's a point in the day where I say, I'm done. That's it. I'm not doing it. So Eric Adams is saying he sleeps better if he's not reading the news. And I believe it. And in Sioux Falls at 6:30, clear skies, 28. Joe Bowman is in the Kello.com News Center. Coming up, Senator John Thune talks about the funding bill now headed to the Senate. We'll talk about that coming up next hour on the program. Also, so Joe will have details on that story and more. Fox News Radio coming up fast. Trending stories in Belf's News Gallery on the way.
American import costs are going up in Europe, retaliation for new aluminum and steel tariffs in the U.S.
A 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports are now in effect. President Trump backing off of his threat of a 50% tariff on Canada after Ontario Premier Doug Ford implemented a 25% charge on electricity exports to the U.S. The White House says Ford decided to pull those tariffs after speaking with members of the Trump administration.
Fox's Ryan Schmelz. Ukraine agrees to a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire with Russia.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the ball is in Moscow's court. President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff is due to travel to Russia in the coming days. The U.S. is resuming intelligence sharing with Ukraine and again supplying military aid.
Fox's Jonathan Savage. The Education Department plans 50% layoffs, cutting around 2,000 jobs. America's listening to Fox News.
Kello News Time at 6:31. I'm Joe Bowman in the Kello.com News Center. House Republicans on Capitol Hill have passed a federal funding bill. The bill passed largely along partisan lines on a 217 to 213 vote. The bill now moves to the Senate. Here's Majority Leader John Thune.
There is a funding vehicle available coming over from the House of Representatives. It will fund the government through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, and we are prepared to take it up here in the Senate and make sure that on Friday the government stays open. But it will be up to the Democrats as to whether or not that happens.
The bill must pass the Senate and get to Trump's desk before the end of Friday to avert a partial shutdown. An investigation is underway following the discovery of a body in Scotland, South Dakota. Attorney General Marty Jackley confirmed the body was found yesterday. He says there's no danger to the public based on what is known so far. The South Dakota DCI is leading the investigation. A registered sex offender is accused of loitering near a Sioux Falls elementary school. 55-year-old Rodney Johnson was convicted back in 2021 of possessing child porn. He was spotted driving slowly near Sonia Sotomayor Elementary School multiple times. Johnson was arrested and jailed on Monday. One USDA program that provides funding for Feeding South Dakota is being cut. The program helped to purchase food from local farmers and producers. Feeding South Dakota says they won't lose too much from the cut, as this one program comprised only about 1% of their total food programming. But this cut program is expected to be felt by the 22 producers Feeding South Dakota was buying from. The organization says in total 30% of their food is purchased through USDA funding, making any additional cuts a high concern. And in sports yesterday, the Sioux Falls Skyforce won their 8th straight game at home in a 121-118 overtime victory over the San Diego Clippers. But the Minnesota Twins lost to the Toronto Blue Jays in spring training play 3-2. From the Kello.com News Center, I'm Joe Bowman.
The news never stops. Kello News Talk 1320 107.9.
Partly cloudy skies and very nice weather today. High of 64 with a light east wind 5 to 10. Low tonight 35. Tomorrow warming up. We have a fire weather watch west of Sioux Falls. High temperature at 75. We could hit 80 in Mitchell. More 70s Friday. Thunderstorms Friday night. Wind whip snow Saturday. From the Storm Center at Kibblland TV, I'm Brian Karstens.
Having trouble receiving Kello at 107.9? If you're in the Sioux Falls Metro, try us at FM 105.1. Kello News Talk 1320 and now at 105.1.
If you're looking for a tech-related job, forget everything you've been told over the last 5 to 10 years. Training for software engineering, web development, IT support, and network administration is a dead end. It's a waste of your time and money. I'm Kim Commando for NetSuite. Download the free CFO's Guide to Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning now at netsuite.com/Kim. In a little over 2 years, artificial intelligence has reshaped the entire tech job market. It's happened so quickly that even most schools have been caught by surprise. The very first question that potential employees will hear is, can you work with AI, and to what extent? Approximately 40% of job postings require AI training and experience. By this time next year, more than 50%. And it's not just high-tech companies. Stockholders are expecting most large businesses to integrate AI. So no matter which way you turn, AI is already there. Why don't you go ahead and take a free AI class right now at MIT Online? And keep tech ahead with my free newsletter at getkim.com. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Rates rising or falling, inflation being up or down. Can someone please invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR all into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backward and more time on what's next. And speaking of opportunity, you can now download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/Kim. The guide is free for you at netsuite.com/Kim. That's netsuite.com/Kim. netsuite.com/Kim.
The Kim Commando Show, live Saturday mornings at 9. Kello News Talk 1320 107.9.
The Kello Hotline is sponsored by Tires, with 2 locations to make sure you have the proper traction this winter.
The Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce helps build our community by advocating for local businesses like the Spa on Phillips. We create rest and relaxation, happiness, and a good experience. The Chamber is an important part of any small business. The Chamber does a really good job of connecting us together so that we can build win-wins for each other within the community, and that helps us grow as an organization.
We stand at your side, so nothing will stand in your way.
Managing a company is exciting, and in today's world, challenging. That's why at Bank Midwest, we've added more benefits to our basic business and business checking accounts. Benefits to help you fight fraud and be more efficient. And these benefits are free. We're here to help local companies be more successful. So we're even offering a cash bonus when you open your account. If getting some extra cash and extra fraud protection matches your goals, come see us. Bank Midwest, member FDIC.
During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places you can't control. Between payroll, your home office, your tax preparer, and the IRS, if your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points every second. If your identity's stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code PLAY. Visit lifelock.com. Terms apply.
Why pay more for prescriptions? Stop overpaying and start saving with Single
Oh, the last of my coffee this morning.
on singlecare.com. Show the coupon at the pharmacy and start saving. SingleCare works at pharmacies nationwide and is completely free to use. Whether you have
I don't know what it is about coffee.
next time you fill a prescription,
It's like
check
pure
the
adrenaline for me in the morning.
best price. Take control of your prescription costs. Go to
Only drink it in the morning.
download the
Have a
free app today.
few cups and then I'm done for the day.
More happens in South Dakota every
But I love
day
it.
than we can fit on one radio station, even Kello. That's why there's Kello.com and Kello on your phone with a free Kello AM app.
With local stories, podcasts, and other exclusive content.
Get more of South Dakota. Kello News.
6:38. It's a little hazy. 28 currently at Kello. Thanks so much for starting your day with the Greg Belfrage Show. I love having you along, my friend. Thanks for being here. This hour of our show brought to you by the Window Shop of Mitchell, offering custom windows starting at $99 a month.
What's trending now?
Add them on Facebook.
Let the tweeting begin. The hashtag does that. News and views from Belf's News Gallery.
These are the stories trending this morning. And Secretary of Education Linda McMahon announcing yesterday that part of the department's final mission will be to cut its workforce by half. And she released a statement saying that this reflects the department's commitment to efficiency, accountability, and ensuring that resources are directed where they matter most to students, parents, and teachers. So she cut the workforce by half, just about half yesterday. And she said, I appreciate the work of the dedicated public servants and their contributions. This is a significant step toward restoring the greatness of the United States education system. And the president had promised that he would do this. It's one of the things the president, said repeatedly out on the campaign trail. Also, there's a story trending. Senior official at USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, instructed the agency's remaining staff yesterday to pull classified and personal documents from safes and shred and burn them. This was an email that was verified by the New York Times. The email that was written by USAID's executive secretary said, shred as many documents first and reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break, she said. So there are questions that are going on about this. American Foreign Service Association said they was alarmed by these reports that USAID had directed the destruction of classified and sensitive documents. And they said federal law is clear. The preservation of government records is essential to transparency, accountability, and the integrity of the legal process. They said we call for full adherence to federal records preservation laws to ensure accountability. Yeah, pretty wild. See where that goes. That story is trending this morning. Also, the U.S. House yesterday voting to pass that continuing resolution to fund the government. Now they're sending the bill to the Senate for approval. And you heard Senate Majority Leader John Thune speaking to that just a few minutes ago. But the final vote in the House was just about along party lines. You had one Republican who voted against the bill and one Democrat who voted for it. Otherwise, it would have been right down party lines. So now that bill goes to the Senate for its approval, and we'll talk more about that coming up this morning after 7. Also, the president now has his entire cabinet. Senate confirmed Lori Chavez de Raymer as Secretary of Labor. So she becomes the latest member of the president's cabinet to be confirmed. And I think in all 17 Democrats voted in favor of her to lead the Department of Labor. Her openness, though, to unions prompted a few Republicans to vote against her. Mitch McConnell, Senator Rand Paul, and Ted Budd all voted against her. Also, we talked about this yesterday, the president on Monday night calling for Republican Representative Thomas Massie to be primaried because he refused to vote for the continuing resolution, the CR. And we talked about that at length yesterday. So the president, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but the president did say on True Social, he said that Thomas Massie is an automatic no vote on just about everything, despite the fact that he's always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. The president said he should be primaried, capital letters, and I will lead the charge against him. Now there are some that are, you've got some conservatives who are not responding well to what the president has said and saying that they believe the president's taking his eye off the ball. What is it with these internal battles with the Republicans at a time when he really needs them to move the country forward? And you're seeing that with these close votes going on in the House yesterday, now in the Senate, this continuing resolution. So do you want to be out there alienating Republicans at a time you really have got to be able to count on them? The U.S. and Ukraine the U.S. is saying that Ukraine will accept a 30-day ceasefire with Russia. And so now the U.S. is lifting a freeze on aid and intelligence to Ukraine. And so they released, the two countries released a joint statement saying Ukraine expressed readiness to accept the U.S. proposal to enact an immediate interim 30-day ceasefire, which can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties and which is subject to acceptance and concurrent implementation by the Russian Federation. So this is a first step toward now conversations with Russia, and they'll be meeting today again to try to move forward on this. Also, there's a lot of stories trending about egg prices, and industry experts are say that the solution to the current egg crisis is not going to be a quick fix. But they believe that the strategy by the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture to address the issue is a big step forward. So farmers told Fox Business they support the focused effort to protect egg-laying hens from the avian influenza. It's known as the bird flu. And they believe it will help stabilize the U.S. egg supply and then reduce prices. So it's going to take some amount of time, but farmers reacting to what the administration is doing to try to reduce, reduce egg prices in the midst of production, which has slowed down. So restaurants and grocers, in some cases, have begun adding surcharges or limiting the number of eggs that customers can purchase. As we see then more outbreaks of bird flu. There have been 36 outbreaks in 9 states of the bird flu. Also, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem this week swore in the new director of the U.S. Secret Service, Sean Curran. Curran had protected President Trump during the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania last summer. He was among the first group of Secret Service agents who rushed then to shield Trump when he was injured during that rally. And so the ceremony took place in the Oval Office. The president was there. Noem, in a statement, said Sean's brave actions when he risked his life to help save President Trump's life in Butler is a testament to his dedication to the mission of the U.S. Secret Service. With his decades of experience, he will return the Secret Service to focusing on its core mission, protecting American leaders and the U.S. financial system. So he was sworn in as the president looked on. Also, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been making a lot of news this week. This appearance with Kennedy on the Hannity program and the news of, Steak and Shake changing from vegetable oil. They're moving away and instead using beef tallow instead of vegetable oil. This has been a big story. Kennedy is against seed oils, and he has blamed them for much of the growth of chronic diseases. He says seed oil is one of the components of processed foods, and that is all science. Ultra-processed foods are like our principal culprit, and this extraordinary explosion in the epidemic we have with chronic disease. He said, when my uncle was president, 3% of Americans had chronic disease. Today, 60%. He's saying this is a step forward. You may have seen the story about a reporter for InfoWars, Jamie White, has died. And Alex Jones of InfoWars says it was a brutal murder that occurred outside of his apartment. And there's been a lot of reaction to this, which is why this story is trending. And so staff at InfoWars grew concerned when Jamie White did not show up to work on Monday. They sent some people over when he didn't answer the phone. And they said because he's always here early, loves to work, loves to fight tyranny, loves to promote freedom. And Alex Jones saying he passed away at the hospital very soon after they got him there. Also, Michelle Obama is launching a new weekly podcast with her brother. The podcast titled IMO with Michelle Obama and Craig Robinson actually will premiere today. And she announced this. She and her brother, she said, along with experts and special guests, we'll be discussing some of your questions. We hope you'll check it out wherever you get your podcasts, she said on X. Also, a federal judge on Monday blocked the Trump administration and their efforts to deport a Columbia grad student who helped organize the anti-Israel protests at the university last year. This is at Columbia. So federal immigration authorities arrested him on Saturday, said they were acting on a State Department order to revoke his green card. He is in the U.S. on a student visa, married to a U.S. citizen. So now that's gotten hung up in the courts. The FBI is now joining the search for that 20-year-old University of Pittsburgh student who went missing nearly a week ago. You may have seen photos of her. A lot of it. It's just beautiful young woman who was on spring break in the Dominican Republic and went missing. So she vanished in the pre-dawn hours of March 6th at the beach in front of her hotel. And so now the FBI is joining the search. Not a lot of information beyond that. Also, a new study by the University of Colorado Boulder. This is sad news. Claims that 1 in 15 U.S. adults have been on the scene of a mass shooting in their lifetime. 1 in 15. This was published Friday. States that about 7% of U.S. adults have been present during a mass shooting, and more than 2% have been injured during one. Study says about 3/4 of those who were present but uninjured still experienced psychological distress, including fear, anxiety, and depression. And I will tell you, as somebody who witnessed a shooting in my Sioux Falls neighborhood a number of years ago, something you never forget. Yeah, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of... So I can't imagine being on the scene of a mass shooting. I can't imagine what that does to folks. Also, the Supreme Court has declined to take the case of a fire chief who says he battled Christian discrimination. So the Supreme Court rejecting to hear the case. Also, Pierce Brosnan is known to many, especially as 007. And so now he was being asked about who, now that Daniel Craig is done, who will be the next 007. And Pierce Brosnan is saying he doesn't think the next James Bond should be American. And I think, yeah, Brosnan was in 4 James Bond films in the late 90s, early 2000s, just before Daniel Craig then took over the franchise. And so now the Wall Street Journal has reported recently that the Broccoli family, which had produced the James Bond films for decades, handing it over to Amazon. And I got very mixed feelings about that. I mean, I've watched some shows on Amazon that are, I watched what they did with the Foundation novel series. And also you look at what they did with Lord of the Rings and, bad jazz, man. I'm concerned that Amazon is going to mess up 007. So Pierce Brosnan is saying the next James Bond should be British and not American. I appreciate that. And there are a couple of people in the running. One is British American star Andrew Garfield. You may not know that he's British, and when you hear him speak, it's in his normal, voice. It's definitely British. Also, American actor Oscar Isaac are among those who are in contention. A number of others as well. And Brosnan said of the takeover by Amazon, he said, "I thought it was coming for some time, I guess, but I think it was the right decision for Barbara and Michael." He says it takes great courage for them to let go. They will still have a say in matters. I hope that Amazon handles the work and the character with dignity and imagination and respect. And Brosnan said, in this world that is moving so fast now at the speed of light, the change does come with a certain lament. And that's a look at the stories trending this morning in Belf's News Gallery. Thanks for starting your day with the Greg Belfrage Show this hour, brought to you by the Window Shop of Mitchell, offering custom windows starting at $99 a month. Thanks so much for being here. Please come back at 9:30 for the 4th hour. I'll see you then. Have a great day. So long.
Save big money on your next painting project right now at